Bună ziua și cam aici se va rezuma discursul meu la nivel de română. Actually, I noticed it's not as mainstream as I was led to believe that this TED Talks are going to be carried out in English. So I think it's worthwhile to justify why I did choose to carry this out in English. The reason is actually fairly simple. I hope that the recording, while she's not here, the recording of this speech will actually be seen by my better half, who is someone that, just like me, used to be a debater at one point in her life. And I think one of the main reasons why I love her so dear is that the fact that at the end of every day I work in a very corporate environment. At the end of every day I get a chance to go home and debate for hours in a row about the most random ideas, about the most random articles that we came across, and just exchange ideas. Now, it won't come as a surprise in light of the bio that you've heard that I will be talking about debating. And if you feel off the bat that it is a geekish, nerdish activity, you're probably right. I'm not going to try to present to you why debating is cool, but I will say that I firmly believe into the idea of debating, to paraphrase a well-known statement, of debating for the purpose of debating. I do believe that the constant clash of conflicting ideas is one of the main drivers within our societies that develops the collective set of ideas that we have between us as a people and within a community. At the same time, I buy into probably the same idea that a lot of you buy into, which says that we should challenge ourselves. Now, on the other hand, what I do believe is that most people fail to take this idea of challenging oneself and actually applying it in a more ad literam meaning. I think most people just take it into idea of overcoming your own condition. You'll see that what I will try to militate today to you and what I will put forward is the idea of stepping back, looking at your own ideas, at your own premises, and understanding what they are, and actively try to engage with yourself and actively try to argue against yourself. Now, before I do that, there's three things that I aim to do in my speech today, in my TED Talk. First, I will define success for you, because that seems to be the overarching theme. I'll then present a bit about what debating is, because I'm not sure how many of you know about it. And lastly, because you're here at TED and I assume you appreciate a good mental stimulation, I'm going to offer an intellectual challenge that I hope you will take home with you. One that, if taken not lightly, I believe can both change the way that you think as an individual, as well as, if overall as the sum everyone engages into, can change the way that we carry out a social dialogue within our societies. Now, defining success, bless you, defining success is actually interesting. I've asked a number of people within my workplace, how would you define success? Because it wasn't something that came very easy into my mind. And one of them simply said, yeah, success means having tons of money, acquiring fame, having fast cars and beautiful women, or beautiful cars and fast women, whichever rocks your boat. I don't think that's easily contestable, and I won't debate with it just for the sake of debating with it. But regardless of whether it's about that, or it's about becoming a camel, or however your definition of success is, to answer the question of how I would define success for you is fairly simple. I can't. Success is a very idiosyncratic feeling, and success in itself and achieving success grossly depends on your take on the world, on your perception of the universe and your place in it. And I don't think it is my place to do that. But what I will try to give you is my definition of success and what I perceive success to be. Before I do that, because it most likely, as you already assume, has to do with debating, I need to explain a bit about what debating is. Now, debating, if you try to define it based on different perspectives, because there's always different perspectives into this relative world. If you ask my mom, for example, what she believes debate is, after having watched me for the last 7 years doing it, she's probably going to tell you is that horrible thing that he does that makes him constantly argue with me when I ask him to do house chores. If you ask my current employer what debate is, she's going to say to you that it's probably the reason why he was pretty good at arguing why he's the best candidate for the job, or at least I hope she thought that when she hired me. And at the same time, it's the horrible thing that he does that makes my life so painful when he tries to argue that he deserves a promotion or a pay raise, or probably both. If you ask me, there's a very simple definition to what debate is. Debate basically implies analyzing the different strengths and weaknesses of varying perspectives, usually colliding perspectives. In a competitive format, competitive debate, which is what I've been practicing for the last 7 years, debate basically means that you have one motion, one idea, one topic, one theme, that we should do something or that we believe in something, and there's always a team that says, yes, that's the right way to go about, and a team that says no. Now, what I love about the sport of debating per se is the virtual limitless of ideas that you can engage with. I firmly believe that there is not one single absolute truth out there in the universe that cannot be contested on a logical basis in one way or another. Let me illustrate that, because that's a bit too strong of a remark to make. Let's have a show of hands. How many people in this room believe that my pants are of a black color? And I promise it's not a trick question. Just a show of hands. Too much light. But as expected, it's a very even spread. Not. Of course, they seem to be of a black color. Everyone sees them as being of a black color. Now, to prove the point that there's nothing that you can't engage with and you can't argue the opposite of, think of this. Color in general tends to be light being reflected off of an object, right? White, for example, represents the perfect blend of 3 basic colors, green, blue, and red, and the way that your eye perceives them as being mixed at the same intensity will usually generate the impression that you're seeing white. Black, as a color, basically represents that there's none of these 3 colors are reflected off of that object. So then black is defined as the absolute absence of these 3 basic colors that compose in their own mix any color out there. So then if black is defined as the lack of a color, then that basically means that these pants cannot possibly be of a black color, because black is not a color to begin with. Now, the purpose of this little exercise is not to actually prove to you that my pants are not black. I think that would be a bit redundant. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there is nothing out there that on a logical basis you cannot at least attempt to engage with and argue the opposite of what seems to be intuitive. Now, the other thing that I want you to bear in mind when we're talking about debating, especially competitive debating, is that in the nature of debating as a sport, you don't choose the side that you're on. Whenever you would hear emotion, probably most teams would tend to go on the easier side. You actually get assigned to argue one side or another, and you have to do it, irrespective of what your beliefs are. Furthermore, sometimes you'll actually have the same motion 2 rounds in a row, and in one round argue one thing, and then in the next be a bit schizophrenic and bipolar and argue exactly the opposite. I think the value in that type of an exercise is the fact that you actively engage with your own beliefs. I think the moment anyone hears any idea, they're automatically going to have a reaction to it, which is basically built around their ideas. The challenge and the trick then becomes, how do I take myself out of my own comfort zone and I put myself in someone else's shoes? This is where my definition of success comes in. My favorite definition of success, according to Arnold Gaslow, is that, and he says, and I quote, success is not the result of spontaneous combustion. You must set yourself on fire. Now, this is, of course, not to be taken literally. What he basically talks about is the fact that you need to commit yourself wholesomely and fully dedicate with passion to a particular goal or target. And the simple fact that you would potentially commit yourself fully to an idea in itself is success. Now, that would be the general interpretation of the idea, but because you've already gotten a feel that I like the counterintuitive things, I'm going to try to argue that you can take a more literal interpretation to that saying. Specifically, I'm going to talk about your own belief system. And this is the intellectual challenge that I want to put forward to you as attendees to this TED Talk. Take your own belief system and try to hammer them down. Actively reflect into what it is that you believe on a particular topic and try to tear it down based on its premises, based on other facts that you've heard from other people disagreeing with you, and intellectually carry out that exercise within your own person. If you wish, you can do it with your friends, but try to do it between yourself and try to actively argue against your most deepest, sincerest opinions. I think I need to illustrate that. And one thing for you to know, I live in Budapest at the moment. I haven't been in Romania for a while, so of course I came a bit early and I met a lot of friends. All of them felt the need to point out that there's a bit more of me that came back than there was when I left. So in light of that, I feel the need to talk about something that I actually feel strongly about, which is fashion and the way that it builds the image of oneself. This is an ongoing debate within our societies, whether or not people feel actual psychological pressure due to the fact of fashion outlets, fashion magazines, runway shows depicting these perfect, voluptuous, skinny bodies, and how that builds an unrealistic image of the world and of what beauty is. And you know, there's been a constant argument that that is what leads to a massive amount of eating disorders. Recently, in May, actually, this month, Israel spearheaded something which I find intriguing, if not fascinating. They actually passed a law in their parliament that clearly stated the following: in advertisements, thou shalt no longer actually use models that, according to the WHO standards, the World Health Organization, would be classified as underweight or anorexic. They actually use an index of some sorts. I'm not going to go into those. But they actually have a way of saying you are underweight, too underweight to be healthy, and as a result, it is illegal to be using you in an advertisement. At the same time, you're discouraged from using Photoshop, but if you do, you need to put up a huge disclaimer clearly stating that we are using Photoshop to build an unrealistic beauty standard here in this publication. Now, I agree with that. I think it is an amazing idea, and I think it is long overdue within our societies. For that matter, if you look in Israel, where this came about, apparently there's 1,500 young teenagers every year that start getting eating disorders. That's out of a population of 7.5 million only. Apparently, between the age bracket of 15 to 24, the #1 cause of death is anorexia. That's mind-boggling, and I can't believe we're not reacting to this faster. Here's what I propose to you. I firmly believe that what they're doing is right. But let's take a step back and think about, well, wait, because this is not necessarily true. I mean, in many ways, the simple fact that you see someone that's beautiful doesn't automatically mean that you will set that as a standard of beauty. At the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll stop eating yourself to death just because you see that particular image. And the very premise that that happens intrinsically negates the complexity of the human psyche. At the same time, in pushing forward such a policy, what basically happens is you're discriminating against girls that are natively skinny just due to their physical appearance, or you're imposing some weird standards on censoring the press. Now, when you build this kind of a rationale within your own mind, the purpose wouldn't be to convince yourself of the opposite idea. The idea is start generating ideas in your mind. Start brainstorming properly on what you would say if someone actively told you, think about this, argue the opposite of what you actively believe in, or die. Just put yourself in that state of mind where you actively need to engage with the ideas opposite to what you believe in. Now, why is it that I think beliefs are interesting in itself? They dictate the way that we act, that we interact with our communities, and even beliefs are used to build different beliefs further on the line. For example, there are the so-called pro-life movements out there that will usually argue life is sanctioned, it should not be affected under any shape or manner, even when the definition of whether or not we have life is problematic, and because of that, we should make abortions illegal. It's a stance, they have that belief, and that's okay. But then you build actions such as in the state of Arizona right now, for example, when they passed a law that says that a person is legally pregnant 2 weeks before conception. That's insane. And they did that because apparently they're trying to limit the period whereby a woman is allowed to legally have an abortion. Now, obviously, their belief that it is the right of a state to intervene and limit the right of a woman of claiming ownership of her own body stems from their adamant belief into how sacred life is. And that's fine. I don't claim to say that building beliefs based on others is wrong. The problem occurs in the fact that most of us actually live with our beliefs and our sets of ideas without fully acknowledging where they stem from. And the moment we build that, we build ideas on top of each other without contesting their very roots and just taking them for granted. And because we take them for granted, the ones that are developed based on it are taken for granted, and so on and so on and so on. The problem then becomes, And you can see this within the English language, and it's actually a good thing that I picked it. You can see how close people feel tied to their belief systems. The English language itself talks about my belief is, I hold the belief that, I took stock of what I believe in. As opposed to when someone tries to argue the opposite, I lost the belief of, I no longer hold the belief of this. It is clear that when we're talking about belief systems, we usually talk about something personal, something that we hold dear as a possession. And funny enough, when someone tries to take away your possessions, regardless of what they are, the general reaction tends to be of you not liking them. Now, that's the problem with debates and social dialogues in our society overall. I think when we have a mass of people that have built ideas without acknowledging where they're coming from, the moment someone tries to actively and rationally argue against them, they take it personal. They think that instead of them trying to engage with the idea on a philosophical, principle, ideological level, they simply don't like you. And at that point, your reaction is not one of logic. And I'm not saying let's all be Spock and leave away our emotions. What I'm saying is stop having a visceral reaction to the very idea of someone contradicting you, instead of actually listen out to them. Now, the benefits of carrying out the exercise that I proposed are twofold. First and foremost, by engaging with your own ideas, you understand their premises. You understand where they're coming from, and if you choose to reinforce them, because that's fine, you'll at least know why you're doing that. That also means, and that's the second reason why I believe this is a good idea, when someone argues against your ideas, you have already thought it through. It's probably not something that you're hearing for the first time that will stir a visceral reaction. Rather, you can engage in a proper, rational, ideological even debate with that person. And guess what? Sometimes, if they're open to it, you might even be more likely to convince them if you do that than just going like, no. What I'm saying is I would love to live in a world, in a community, where people feel free to engage in other people's ideas and actively try to deconstruct them, where tackling someone's ideas is not seen as something that's personal, but rather something that is intellectual. I would love to live in a community where ideas are being exchanged and contradicted constantly for the very idea of reaching the best possible outcomes out of our solutions. And if one of you decides to go home today and take on this intellectual challenge, and it works and you feel the benefits of it, and then you convince someone else to do it, well then that is what for me success will be. Thank you.